I remember sunlight. That is the first lie I tell myself each evening when consciousness floods back into this cold vessel that was once my body. The truth is more complicated. I recall the idea of sunlight. I remember that it once warmed my skin. I remember that it cast shadows and illuminated texts I studied by open windows. But the sensation itself, the actual feeling of standing beneath its rays, that memory faded somewhere during the 3rd century of my condition. My name was Edran Weil. Perhaps it still is, though names seem trivial when measured against eternity. I was a scholar once, devoted to understanding death not as an ending but as a transition of energy. How ironic that I now exist as living proof of my own theories, trapped in this endless transition between life and death, belonging fully to neither realm. I wake each night in the same manner. First comes awareness of stone beneath my back, then the weight of darkness pressing against closed eyelids. Next arrives the hunger, sharp and demanding, as a blade against the throat. Only after these sensations settle do I permit myself to open my eyes to the perfect blackness of my sanctuary. Some nights I lie still for hours, attempting to reconstruct memories of who I once was, piecing together fragments of scholarly pursuits and philosophical debates. Other evenings the hunger allows no such contemplation. Tonight the hunger rules. It coils inside me like a serpent, cold and patient but insistent. I rise from my stone bed in a motion too fluid for mortal flesh. There was a time when this unnatural grace disturbed me. Now it is simply what I am. The darkness presents no obstacle to my eyes. I see the contours of my sanctuary with perfect clarity. The stone coffin, the ancient tapestries that muffle sound and remind me of a civilization now dust. The small writing desk, where I document observations about my condition. The carefully preserved tomes of necromantic philosophy that once formed the foundation of my mortal studies. I dress methodically in garments fashioned a century ago, now considered antiquated by the world above. Fashion changes with baffling speed. When you watch generations flicker past like candle flames, you stop trying to keep pace with such trivialities. I select clothing that will attract minimal attention. Dark colors, conservative cuts. The costume of a man who wishes to blend into shadows. My sanctuary lies beneath an abandoned chapel in what was once the prestigious university district. The irony does not escape me. I studied here as a living man, exploring theoretical concepts of life and death in sunlit halls. Now I haunt its shadows, embodying the very principles I once debated with such academic detachment. The passage upward is narrow, designed to be navigable only to those with unnatural agility. I ascend with practiced ease, emerging into the ruined chapel, where moonlight filters through collapsed sections of roof. I pause here, as I always do, to observe the sky. Tonight, clouds obscure most stars, but a sliver of moon provides enough illumination to cast faint shadows across broken pews and fallen masonry. I wonder sometimes if my fascination with the night sky stems from genuine appreciation, or merely represents my mind grasping at some remnant of humanity. The hunger speaks louder now, sensing proximity to satisfaction. I have developed rules over centuries, principles that separate me from mindless predators. I do not hunt children. I do not drain victims completely unless they have committed atrocities that demand justice. I feed only enough to sustain my existence, leaving most to recover from what they will remember as a strange weakness or fainting spell. These rules do not absolve me. They merely allow me to maintain the fiction that some part of Edran Vai, the ethical philosopher, survives in this undead form. I move through darkened streets with deliberate steps. The city has changed names 3 times since my transformation. Buildings rise and fall, streets widen or disappear entirely, yet the essential nature of urban life remains constant. There are always shadows, always forgotten corners, always those who walk alone at night, either by necessity or poor judgment. Tonight, I find myself drawn toward the tavern district. The hour is late enough that most establishments have closed, releasing patrons into the night. Some travel in groups, laughing too loudly, protected by their numbers. Others walk alone, vulnerable and perfect. I follow a solitary figure down a narrow street. From his gait, I can tell he has consumed substantial alcohol. From his clothing, I determine he has wealth to spare. From the cruel way he dismissed the tavern girl who sought additional payment, I decide he deserves what comes next. When I strike, it happens between heartbeats. One moment I trail behind him, the next I have pulled him into an alleyway, one hand covering his mouth, the other tilting his head to expose his neck. Fear floods his body with adrenaline, souring the blood slightly but sharpening my senses. I lean close to his ear. "Be still," I whisper, my voice carrying the weight of unnatural compulsion. This will be over quickly. I sink fangs into flesh, feeling the momentary resistance before skin yields. The first rush of blood triggers a transformation that still horrifies the scholarly observer that survives within me. My consciousness fragments. The hunger takes control, flooding my entire being with savage pleasure. The world narrows to the pulsing flow of life, transferring from his body to mine. Warmth spreads through my cold limbs, colors intensify, sounds sharpen. For precious moments I feel almost alive. I stop before taking too much, before the permanent damage is done. This control did not come easily. The first years of my condition were marked by bodies drained completely, discarded in my desperate confusion. I release my victim, catching his weight as he slumps forward. His eyes are unfocused, consciousness dimmed but not extinguished. I arrange him against the alley wall as though he simply sat down to rest during his journey home. By morning, he will remember nothing beyond leaving the tavern. Perhaps he will attribute his weakness to excessive drink. As I step back into the night, the euphoria of feeding begins its slow transformation into guilt. This pattern has repeated thousands of times. The desperate need, the momentary satisfaction, the crushing remorse that follows. Early in my undeath, I believed the guilt would eventually fade, that I would become the monster folklore claimed I already was. The persistence of conscience has proven to be both blessing and curse. It prevents me from descending into mindless predation but ensures I never know peace. I walk aimlessly through the city, allowing the cold night air to clear my thoughts. With hunger temporarily satiated, my mind functions with unnatural clarity. I observe details invisible to mortal eyes, the intricate patterns of moss growing between cobblestones, the subtle differences in mortar composition, where buildings have been repaired over decades, the unique rhythms of each heart that passes near me, each one a temptation, each one a reminder of what was stolen from me. In these moments after feeding, memories surface with greater vividness. I recall the night of my transformation with unwelcome clarity. The ancient vampire who found me working late in my university chambers, surrounded by texts on necromantic theory, how he seemed amused by my scholarly attempts to dissect the mechanics of death. The conversation that extended until dawn approached. His offer to show me what my books could never explain, my foolish, arrogant acceptance. I remember the pain of transformation, the sensation of life draining away, replaced by something colder and more enduring. I remember awakening to insatiable hunger and the horror of my first kill. Most of all, I remember the Creator who abandoned me immediately after my transformation. No guidance, no explanation, Simply a note explaining that true understanding of death could only come through direct experience, and that I now had eternity to contemplate the answers I sought. The first century was the most difficult, learning to control the hunger, discovering the limits and abilities of my new existence, watching as everyone I had known aged and died while I remained unchanged. I contemplated true death countless times, walked toward dawn only to retreat at the last moment, too cowardly or too curious to end my existence. By the second century, I had established patterns, regular feeding grounds, secure resting places, methods of acquiring the wealth needed to maintain my existence in human society. I began documenting my observations, creating the comprehensive study of vampiric existence I had longed for as a mortal scholar. The third century brought something unexpected. The voices began. At first, I believed them to be manifestations of guilt or emerging madness, whispers that came in quiet moments between heartbeats, fragments of thoughts and memories not my own. Eventually, I understood the truth. Something of my victims remained with me, not their souls, precisely, but impressions, echoes. The blood carries memory, and in consuming it, I absorbed fragments of countless lives. These voices have been my companions through centuries of solitude. Sometimes they offer insights or knowledge from unexpected sources. Other times they torment me with reminders of lives cut short or altered by my predation. Most disturbing are the voices that urge greater violence, that promise release through complete surrender to the hunger. I find myself at the old university grounds, drawn here, as I often am after feeding. Most of the original structures have been replaced, but certain corners remain recognizable, even after centuries. I stand before the philosophy, building where I once taught, now repurposed for some administrative function. Through windows, I can see shelves of modern books, their spines bearing titles in languages that did not exist when I was mortal. A figure appears in my peripheral vision, another predator, though human rather than vampire. He stalks a young woman carrying an armload of books, likely a student returning from late studies. His intentions are transparent to my heightened senses. Elevated heart rate, the chemical signature of anticipation, the careful way he maintains distance while never losing sight of his target. I feel the hunger stir again, responsive to opportunity rather than need. The voices offer contradictory advice. Some urge me to intervene, to protect the innocent by preying on the predator. Others suggest walking away, avoiding unnecessary complications. The most disturbing voices propose allowing the human predator to commit his crime, then feeding on both attacker and victim in the aftermath. I choose intervention, not from nobility, but because it allows me to feed again while maintaining the illusion of moral purpose. I move silently, intercepting the man as he prepares to close the distance to his target. He never sees me coming. One moment he walks with predatory purpose, the next he finds himself pulled into darkness. My hand clamped over his mouth, my voice in his ear. "She is not yours to harm," I whisper. His fear is immediate and gratifying. I taste it in the air before I taste it in his blood. The hunger responds eagerly to the particular flavor of terror that comes from a predator becoming prey. When my fangs pierce his throat, his struggle is more pronounced than my earlier victim. This one fights until consciousness fades. I drink deeply, not bothering with restraint. The world will not miss this one. When I finally step away from the cooling body, the euphoria is more intense than before. Colors seem impossibly vivid. Sounds carry from blocks away with perfect clarity. For several minutes, I simply stand motionless, allowing sensations to wash over me. This is the closest I come to feeling truly alive, and I have learned to savor these moments before the guilt returns. I dispose of the body in the river that runs through the eastern quarter of the city. The current will carry it downstream, where it may never be found, or may be discovered too late to determine the true cause of death. As I watch it disappear into dark waters, I wonder which is the greater sin, the taking of life, or the cold calculation with which I conceal evidence of my nature. By the time I return to the university grounds, the young woman has safely reached her destination. Lights illuminate windows in what appears to be student housing. I stand in shadows across the street, watching as silhouettes move behind curtains. Normal life continues, untouched by the darkness that transpired nearby. She will never know what fate was averted this night, never know the cost of her protection. The guilt arrives precisely on schedule, washing away the last vestiges of feeding euphoria. With it comes the familiar litany of self-recrimination. I tell myself the world is better without the predator I eliminated, that I chose the most deserving victim available, that I showed restraint with the first feeding. The justifications sound hollow even to my own ears. The voices are louder now, enriched by fresh blood. They speak simultaneously, a chorus of contradictions. Some offer consolation, insisting I acted as guardian rather than monster. Others condemn with the righteous certainty of those who have never faced my particular hunger. Most unsettling are the voices that speak with intimate understanding, the echoes of other predators I have consumed over centuries. These whisper that I merely eliminate competition, that moral justification is a convenient fiction. I return to my sanctuary as the eastern sky shows the first hint of lightening. Dawn remains hours away, but I prefer to be securely below ground well before sunlight threatens. The journey back feels longer when weighted with fresh guilt. I move more slowly than necessary, punishing myself with the burden of contemplation. In my underground chamber, I light a single candle, its flame unnecessarily small for my enhanced vision but comforting in its warm glow. I sit at my writing desk and open the current journal. The page waiting for tonight's entry remains blank for long minutes, as I struggle to find words for the same cycle repeated for centuries. Finally, I write with elegant script shaped by educated hands long dead. 2 feedings this night, the first controlled, the second complete. Justifications remain unsatisfying. The voices grow more distinct with each passing year. I increasingly suspect this condition is not simply biological or magical transformation, but rather an elaborate spiritual punishment designed to force contemplation of mortality through its absence. I close the journal and stare at the candle flame. Fire is one of the few genuine threats to my existence, yet I find myself drawn to its light. Perhaps some part of me remembers worship of older gods associated with flame and purification. Perhaps it simply represents the sun I can no longer endure. As dawn approaches above ground, I feel the familiar heaviness settling into my limbs. The voices gradually quiet as consciousness prepares to retreat. I extinguish the candle and lie upon the stone bed that has cradled me through countless days. As darkness claims me, I permit myself the same hope that has accompanied each morning's oblivion for centuries. Perhaps tonight's dreams will finally offer answers. Perhaps today's death will be permanent. When consciousness returns the following evening, I become aware first of whispers. The voices speak with unusual clarity, still energized by the previous night's feedings. They fall silent the moment I open my eyes, but their message lingers. Something has changed in the world above, something that concerns me directly. I rise and dress with greater urgency than usual. The hunger remains distant, satisfied by the double feeding. This gives me unusual freedom of thought and action, unhindered by the constant press of need. I ascend to the ruined chapel and immediately sense the difference. The air carries unfamiliar scents, incense, oil. Recently disturbed dust. Someone has been here during daylight hours. Someone with particular interest in signs of unusual activity. I examine the chapel floor and find what I feared. Faint markings in chalk, nearly invisible to mortal eyes but blazingly obvious to my enhanced senses. Symbols of warding and detection. Signs associated with hunters of my kind. I have encountered vampire hunters before. Most are delusional or dangerously misinformed, posing little threat beyond inconvenience. Occasionally one appears with genuine knowledge and proper preparation. These rare individuals present actual danger. From the precision of these markings, I suspect the latter. Maintaining this sanctuary is no longer safe. I return below to gather essential possessions. The journals documenting centuries of existence, select tomes of particular importance, a small chest containing gems and gold coins, currency that retains value regardless of which empire rises or falls above. Everything fits within a single leather satchel, an indication of how little material connection I maintain with the world. I emerge from the chapel through a secondary exit, a narrow passage that opens into an abandoned well 2 blocks distant. The night air carries the same scents I detected earlier, stronger now. I expand my senses, searching for heartbeats where none should be. The hunter is nearby, watching the chapel, waiting for me to emerge through the main entrance. I move in the opposite direction, keeping to deepest shadows. The city offers countless hiding places for one with my abilities. I could simply disappear, establish a new sanctuary in another district or another city entirely. Yet something holds me here. Curiosity, perhaps, or pride, or the simple fact that I have existed too long to run from every threat. Instead, I circle back, approaching from the direction the hunter would least expect. I locate him concealed in the shadowed doorway of a building opposite the chapel. From his elevated heart rate and the mixture of fear and determination in his scent, I confirm he is indeed waiting for me. I study him from the darkness. He appears young, perhaps 30 years of age. His clothing is nondescript but functional, chosen for movement rather than style. He carries weapons designed specifically for my kind. Stakes of various materials, a crossbow with peculiar bolts, vials of what is likely consecrated water or alchemical compounds. Most telling is the book partially visible in his satchel. I recognize its binding. The Natural Philosophy of Unnatural Existence by Professor Edran Weiss. My own work, published under pseudonym 2 centuries ago. The definitive scholarly study of vampiric nature, containing enough truth to guide serious hunters while deliberately excluding certain crucial details. The irony is exquisite. This hunter studies my research, unaware that he stalks its author. I consider the possibilities. I could eliminate him easily. His preparation, while impressive, depends on me behaving according to patterns I documented myself. Alternatively, I could simply vanish, leaving him to waste weeks searching for a quarry long gone. A third option presents itself. Dangerous, but intriguing. I could reveal myself, not as prey, but as teacher. Share the knowledge I deliberately excluded from my published work. The voices offer contradictory counsel, as always. Some warn of inevitable betrayal. Others suggest the novelty of genuine conversation with a mortal who understands my nature. I make my decision. Moving silently to the rooftops, I position myself directly above his hiding place. Then I speak just loudly enough for him alone to hear. Your preparation is admirable, Hunter. The chalk markings show particular scholarship. However, I wrote the text you carry, and I assure you it contains deliberate omissions. His reaction is immediate and professional. He rolls from the doorway into the street. coming up in a defensive posture, crossbow aimed toward the roof. His eyes scan the darkness, unable to pierce shadows that present no obstacle to my sight. "Show yourself," he demands, voice remarkably steady. "That would be tactically unsound." I reply from a different position, having moved silently while he focused on my previous location. "I prefer conversation before confrontation." "Vampires always do," he responds. "They enjoy playing with prey, an understandable misconception. The truth is more nuanced. We enjoy rare opportunities for discourse with those who comprehend our existence. Such moments are precious when measured against centuries of solitude." He adjusts his position, back against a wall to prevent approach from behind, a sensible precaution, though insufficient against my abilities. "What do you want?" he asks, currently understanding. "You hunt me specifically rather than any vampire you might encounter. You came prepared with my own research. This suggests personal motivation rather than general principles. I find myself curious. His heartbeat accelerates slightly. "I have touched on truth. You killed my father," he says after a lengthy pause. 15 years ago, he was a watchman near the old market district. I search memories of countless feedings across centuries. Nothing specific emerges. Another sin of my existence. Deaths significant enough to spawn vengeance, yet insignificant enough to blur together in endless predation. I regret that I cannot recall the specific incident. I admit, my existence spans centuries. Individual feedings fade from memory. He wasn't just a feeding. The hunter snarls, emotion briefly overcoming caution. He was investigating disappearances, getting close to discovering your kind. You left a message carved into his flesh, a warning to others. This detail triggers recognition. A period approximately 15 years passed when another vampire briefly shared hunting grounds in this city. A reckless, theatrical creature who enjoyed creating spectacles of his kills. I eliminated him precisely because such behavior threatened all of our kind. That was not my work, I explain. Another of my kind claimed this territory briefly. His methods were flamboyant and dangerous. I destroyed him for precisely that reason. You expect me to believe that vampires police each other? Skepticism fills his voice. We eliminate threats to our continued existence. Those who draw excessive attention endanger us all. Your father encountered the wrong vampire at the wrong time. Had I discovered him, he would have simply been another feeding, left alive but weakened. He processes this information, crossbow never wavering. Even if that's true, you've killed countless others. The book I carry may be incomplete, but it clearly establishes your predatory nature, written by a scholar named Weil, who mysteriously disappeared centuries ago. How long since anyone has spoken it aloud while knowing its significance? Professor Edran Weil, I say softly. I was meticulous in my research, comprehensive in documenting the vampiric condition. Everything in that text is accurate, if strategically incomplete. Understanding dawns in his expression. The crossbow wavers slightly. You're claiming to be Valle. The author himself. I am what remains of him. The scholar who sought to understand death became its servant instead. A rather heavy-handed object lesson from the universe. Don't you agree? He adjusts his grip on the crossbow, conflicting emotions evident in his posture. The hunter, trained to destroy monsters, now confronts the author of his primary text. If you're truly vile, then you've been feeding on people for centuries, creating victims like my father. I have sustained my existence through the blood of others, I acknowledge. Though I did not kill your father, I have ended other lives. I have also spared many more, taking only what sustains me rather than draining victims completely. I have hunted those who prey on the innocent, small acts of atonement that can never balance the scales. Why are you telling me this? He asks. Why not just kill me or disappear? I consider the question carefully. The voices offer various explanations, none entirely satisfying. Fatigue, perhaps, I finally admit. Weariness with endless cycles of hunger, feeding, and guilt. Or possibly the novelty of speaking openly with someone who has studied my nature. When you exist for centuries, genuine novelty becomes precious. You want me to kill you? The question contains equal parts confusion and suspicion. If I desired true death, I need only greet the dawn. No, Hunter. I want conversation before you inevitably attempt to destroy me, and I inevitably disappear into the night. A brief respite from the monotony of existence. We speak until midnight, passes into deepest night. He maintains his defensive posture, never lowering the crossbow. I remain in shadows, moving occasionally to prevent him from pinpointing my exact location. Our conversation ranges from the philosophical to the practical. He asks questions about vampiric weaknesses and strengths. I answer with greater honesty than my published work, though still maintaining certain secrets essential to my survival. I learn his name is Thorn. He has hunted my kind for 7 years, claiming 3 confirmed kills. Each vampire presents unique challenges, he explains. Some rely on brute strength, others on manipulation or stealth. The most dangerous employ human servants, creating layers of protection that must be penetrated before reaching the vampire itself. And what is my particular challenge? I ask. Knowledge, he replies without hesitation. You understand what you are better than any vampire I've encountered. The others were ruled by hunger or arrogance. You observe yourself with scholarly detachment. It makes you more dangerous but potentially more approachable. His assessment is surprisingly insightful. I find myself appreciating his intelligence even as I recognize the threat he represents. Yet you still intend to destroy me, I note. You feed on people, he says simply. Whatever justifications you've created over centuries, you survive by taking what isn't yours to take. I cannot argue with this fundamental truth. Instead, I offer a proposition. I will leave this city tonight, establish myself elsewhere, far from your hunting grounds. In exchange, I ask only that you consider one question during my absence. What question? Are all predators equally deserving of destruction? Or might some serve necessary functions within the natural order? He scoffs. There's nothing natural about vampires. Nothing natural about human civilization either, I counter. Yet here we both stand, products of forces that transcend simple categorization. Consider how many predators walk these streets with beating hearts. Those who exploit, who abuse, who destroy lives through greed or cruelty rather than hunger. Are they more deserving of continued existence merely because they share your biology? That's for human justice to decide, he insists. And when human justice fails, when predators hide behind wealth or power or careful concealment of their true nature, who then provides balance? The question hangs between us as dawn approaches. I sense his fatigue, the natural limitations of mortal flesh demanding rest after a night of heightened vigilance. My own body remains tireless. Another advantage of my condition. Our conversation. I conclude. I tell him. Dawn comes, and while it doesn't instantly destroy me as folklore suggests, extended exposure remains unpleasant. I will honor my word and depart this city. Whether you continue your hunt elsewhere is your choice. This isn't over, he promises. Few things truly end, I reply. They merely transform, much like death itself. Until we meet again, Hunter. I vanish into deepest shadows before he can respond, moving with supernatural speed through narrow alleys toward temporary shelter. I have several emergency sanctuaries throughout the city, places prepared for precisely this scenario. The nearest lies beneath an abandoned tannery in the industrial district, overlooked due to lingering, unpleasant odors that bother humans far more than they disturb me. As I secure myself in this temporary haven, I reflect on the night's unexpected encounter. The hunter named Thorn presents danger, certainly, but also something I had not anticipated: recognition, understanding. For centuries, I have existed adjacent to humanity, never fully seen for what I am. This hunter studies my nature specifically, seeks to destroy me, yes, but must first comprehend me. There is strange comfort in being truly perceived, even by an adversary, perhaps especially by an adversary whose perception is unclouded by false sympathy or romantic notions about immortality. Thorn sees the monster accurately, which makes his insights about my scholarly detachment particularly valuable. I settle into an improvised resting place as distant sounds suggest the city awakening to a new day. Before consciousness fades, I make my decision. I will indeed leave this place, but not permanently. I will return after sufficient time has passed. I will seek the hunter again, not out of hunger or malice, but out of recognition that in his focused hatred, he offers something I have not experienced in centuries. He offers understanding. The darkness takes me then, suspending thought, until night returns. My last awareness is of the voices, unusually harmonious, whispering that everything has changed, that the monotony of endless existence has been disrupted by something new, something dangerous, something almost like hope. Time passes differently for my kind. When you measure existence in centuries rather than decades, your perception of duration changes. Days blur together. Years become mere seasons in an endless cycle. Only significant changes or unusual occurrences create distinct memories to separate one period from another. I left the city as promised, traveling north to cooler regions where longer nights provided greater freedom of movement. I established new feeding grounds, new sanctuaries, new patterns of existence. I continued my journals, documenting observations both practical and philosophical. The voices remained my constant companions, offering contradictory counsel and occasional insights. 5 years passed before curiosity overcame caution. 5 years of wondering whether the hunter named Thorn still pursued his vendetta. 5 years of considering the strange connection, forged through mutual recognition of predatory nature. I returned to the city under cover of a particularly stormy night, rain providing additional concealment from watchful eyes. Much had changed in my absence. New buildings dominated the skyline. Streets had been widened or rerouted. The university district had expanded, claiming territories previously dedicated to commerce or industry. Yet beneath these surface transformations, the essential character remained constant. The same patterns of life and death, prosperity and poverty, safety and danger played out in slightly altered settings. I avoided my former sanctuary, assuming Thorn would monitor it for signs of return. Instead, I established temporary quarters in the catacombs beneath the old city cemetery, an appropriately morbid dwelling that offered both security and symbolic resonance. The proximity to mortal remains created a peculiar comfort, a reminder that all existence eventually transitions to stillness. For several weeks, I maintained strict hunting protocols. I fed minimally, taking only enough blood to sustain basic functions. I selected victims exclusively from those who demonstrated predatory behavior themselves. I left no evidence that might alert Thorn or others to my presence. During daylight hours, I extended my documentation of vampiric existence, focusing particularly on the philosophical implications of prolonged consciousness. When I finally encountered Thorn again, it happened entirely by accident. I had not actively sought him, assuming such direct approach would trigger immediate conflict. Instead, while observing nightlife from the shadows near the university, I detected a familiar heartbeat pattern, the slightly elevated pace, the particular rhythm I had noted during our previous conversation. He sat alone at an outdoor table belonging to a small tavern frequented by students and faculty. Before him lay scattered papers and what appeared to be maps. He had aged visibly in 5 years. New lines marked his face. A scar crossed his left cheek. His posture suggested accumulated injuries poorly healed. The toll of his chosen profession showed clearly in physical deterioration. I could have simply withdrawn, preserving my anonymity. Instead, I approached openly for the first time, not from shadows or concealment, but directly along the street, allowing him full view of my approach. His recognition was immediate. His hand moved toward a concealed weapon, then stopped. His heart rate increased, but his expression remained controlled. "Professor Vi," he said as I reached his table. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. "Hunter Thorne," I replied with equal formality. "May I join you? I believe our previous conversation ended prematurely." He gestured toward the empty chair opposite his own. A surprisingly calm acceptance of Predator at his table. As I sat, I noted additional details. The papers before him documented supernatural activity throughout the region, reports of missing persons, strange sightings, unexplained deaths. His research extended far beyond mere vampire hunting. "You said you would leave the city," he remarked, voice neutral. "I did leave, for 5 years. Curiosity eventually overcame caution." Curiosity about what? Whether you had considered the question I posed, whether you still hunted, whether age had brought any evolution in perspective. He studied me with clinical detachment that mirrored my own observational tendencies. "You haven't aged at all," he noted. "Exactly as you described in your text. The physical form remains static," I confirmed. "The mind, however, continues to evolve, albeit slowly. Centuries of existence create certain patterns of thought difficult to disrupt." He gathered his papers into a neat pile, movements deliberately casual, despite the tension evident in his posture. "I've killed 2 more of your kind since we last met. Both significantly younger than you, both far less controlled in their feeding patterns." "I suspected as much," I replied. "You've developed greater skill." The scar suggests at least one encounter proved challenging. His hand moved unconsciously to the mark on his cheek. "Female vampire in Westmarch. She kept human servants who used conventional weapons. Crossbow bolt grazed me before I reached her. Yet you prevailed, eventually." We regarded each other across the small table. Predator and hunter engaged in oddly civilized discourse. Around us, normal life continued. Students laughed and argued over philosophical points. Servers delivered drinks and collected payment. No one appeared to notice the unnatural stillness at our particular table. "I did consider your question," Thorne finally said. "About predators serving necessary functions, about human monsters perhaps deserving destruction more than supernatural ones." "And your conclusion?" He smiled thinly. "That the question itself represents a false choice. Both require opposition. The methods differ, but the principle remains constant. Human predators face human justice, however imperfect. Supernatural predators face me, and those like me. A convenient moral framework," I observed. "It preserves your purpose while acknowledging complexity." What did you expect? That philosophical debate would convince me to abandon my life's work. Not abandonment, evolution. Recognition that existence rarely sorts neatly into absolute categories. Our conversation continued as night deepened around us. We spoke not as adversaries but as representatives of opposing natural forces, each acknowledging the other's necessity. He shared details of his hunts since our last meeting. I offered insights about vampiric nature not included in my published work. The exchange felt almost collegial, despite the underlying knowledge that our temporary truce could shatter at any moment. As midnight approached, Thorn addressed the obvious question. Why this approach? Why risk sitting openly with someone dedicated to destroying your kind? I considered my response carefully. The voices offered various explanations, but I selected the most honest answer. Isolation, I said simply. Centuries of existence adjacent to humanity, but never truly engaging with it, creates a particular form of madness. The voices of those I've fed upon provide some companionship, but their perspective remains limited by their brief lives. You, however, understand what I am while retaining your humanity. This creates possibility for discourse unavailable elsewhere. The voices, he repeated. You mentioned those before. The memories of victims carried in blood. Not precisely memories, more like impressions, echoes of personality and perspective that accumulate over time. They speak most clearly immediately after feeding, then gradually fade until the next consumption. He leaned forward, scholarly interest temporarily overcoming Hunter's caution. That's not in your book. I revealed enough for serious study while withholding details essential to survival. What else did you omit? I smiled slightly. Information best exchanged incrementally, Hunter. Mutual disclosure creates more sustainable conversation than complete revelation. He acknowledged this with a nod. Fair enough. Perhaps we could establish regular meetings. Exchange information gradually as you suggest. The proposal surprised me, despite its obvious tactical advantage for him. Regular contact would allow him to study my patterns, potentially preparing more effective methods for eventual confrontation. Yet his expression suggested genuine intellectual curiosity alongside strategic calculation. An unusual arrangement, I noted. Predator and hunter meeting by design rather than circumstance. Unusual circumstances justify unusual arrangements. I considered the risks against potential benefits. Regular conversation with someone who understood my nature offered rare intellectual stimulation. The danger he presented remained constant, whether we met regularly or not. If anything, structured interaction might reduce immediate threat through familiarity. Very well, I agreed, with certain conditions, neutral locations, no attempts at tracking between meetings, continuation contingent upon mutual benefit. Agreed, he said immediately. Weekly, same location. Monthly would be wiser. Reduces pattern recognition by others who might be watching either of us. Thus began the strangest relationship of my centuries-long existence. For over a year, we met monthly at various locations throughout the city. Each encounter followed similar patterns. Exchange of information about vampiric nature balanced against updates on supernatural activity in the region. Philosophical discourse about predation, justice, and morality. Occasional personal revelations that gradually constructed deeper understanding of each other's perspective. I learned that Thorn's vendetta extended beyond vampires to all supernatural predators that threatened humanity, that his father's death served as catalyst rather than sole motivation, that he maintained extensive networks of informants and fellow hunters across multiple cities, that he viewed his work as sacred calling rather than mere profession. He learned details about vampiric existence omitted from published accounts, the voices that accompanied consumption of blood, the gradual fading of certain emotional responses over centuries, the particular hunger that transcends mere physical need, the weight of accumulated memory across immeasurable nights. Neither of us harbored illusions about fundamental change in the other's nature. I remained predator, he remained hunter. Yet within these fixed roles, nuance emerged. Recognition that existence contains gradations beyond simple binary opposition. The voices responded differently to these meetings than to other aspects of my existence. Some counseled caution, warning of inevitable betrayal. Others welcomed intellectual stimulation after centuries of relative isolation. Most intriguing were those that suggested these conversations represented some form of atonement, acknowledgement of humanity I had sacrificed upon transformation. During our 7th meeting, Thorn arrived with fresh injuries, bruising visible at his collar, slight favoring of his left leg, diminished range of motion in his right arm, signs of recent violent confrontation. "Another vampire?" I inquired as he settled stiffly into his chair. "Something else," he replied. "Something I haven't encountered before. It appears human most of the time, but transforms under specific conditions. Strength and speed comparable to your kind, but with different vulnerabilities. Lycanthrope, perhaps," I suggested, though the specific trigger for transformation varies depending on bloodline. Some change with lunar cycles, others through conscious control or emotional stimulus. He showed greater interest than usual. "You have knowledge of such creatures, theoretical rather than experiential. We tend to avoid each other's territories when possible. Different predatory needs create natural separation. This one's killing pattern is escalating," Thorn explained. "Started with livestock, progressed to isolated travelers, now targets homes on the city outskirts. 3 families killed in the past month, consumed rather than merely killed." Consumption suggests genuine hunger rather than sport or territorial marking, I observed. Targeting families indicates either increasing need or specific selection criteria. "Have you identified any connection between victims?" Our conversation shifted from philosophical exchange to practical problem solving. I found myself offering insights about supernatural predation, drawn from centuries of observation. He provided details of specific incidents, patterns of activity, evidence left behind. Together, we constructed theoretical profile of the creature plaguing the city's edges. "Why are you helping me?" he asked abruptly, interrupting our analysis. "This creature presents no direct threat to you. Its destruction offers no obvious benefit." I considered the question carefully. The voices offered contradictory explanations. As always, I selected the most honest response. "Competition elimination represents only secondary motivation," I admitted. "More significant is the intellectual exercise itself. Applied problem solving provides stimulation unavailable in pure theoretical contemplation. Additionally, I find myself oddly invested in continuation of our conversations, which requires your continued survival." He seemed to accept this explanation, recognizing self-interest beneath apparent altruism. Our collaborative analysis continued, eventually suggesting likely locations for the creature's daytime sanctuary and effective methods for confrontation. As our meeting concluded, I offered unusual proposal. "Would you accept direct assistance rather than merely theoretical consultation? This creature sounds formidable even for experienced hunter." Thorn's surprise was evident in momentary elevation of heart rate and subtle shift in posture. "You're offering to help me hunt it?" "I'm offering to help you destroy a mutual threat," I clarified. "This creature's escalating behavior draws attention that endangers all non-human entities in the region. Additionally, its targeting of families violates certain principles I maintain, despite my predatory nature." He studied me with the careful assessment I had come to expect from him. Hunting together would require unprecedented trust on both sides. Indeed, perhaps excessive trust, given our fundamental opposition. The offer remains available, should practicality overcome principle. We parted with usual precautions, each taking separate routes into the night. I returned to my current sanctuary beneath abandoned sections of the sewer system, contemplating the peculiar evolution of our arrangement, from hunter and hunted to something approximating reluctant colleagues. The voices debated merits and dangers of deepening involvement with human dedicated to destroying our kind. 3 nights later, Thorn sought me out for the first time. He appeared at the cemetery near my temporary sanctuary, standing openly among weathered gravestones rather than attempting concealment. I detected his presence immediately, the familiar rhythm of his heartbeat distinguishable even among city's nocturnal sounds. I emerged from shadows to stand before him, maintaining careful distance. His condition had deteriorated since our meeting. Fresh injuries marked his visible skin. Bandages wrapped his left forearm. The scent of blood, both his own and others, clung to his clothing. Replied, voice tight with controlled pain. I tracked it to an abandoned mill north of the city. Confrontation went poorly. Yet you survived. Barely. It was stronger than anticipated. Faster, seemingly immune to conventional weapons. And now you reconsider my offer of assistance. He nodded once, the gesture clearly costing him in physical discomfort. With conditions, we focus exclusively on this creature. Our usual arrangement resumes afterward. No expectation of permanent alliance. Agreed, I said without hesitation. When do we begin? Now. Tonight. The mill where I tracked it seems to be its current territory. With your abilities, we might locate its specific sanctuary before dawn. The temporary alliance proved both effective and unsettling. We traveled north together, maintaining silence except for necessary communication. Thorn provided details of previous encounter, while I offered tactical suggestions based on centuries of predatory experience. The contradiction inherent in our cooperation remained unacknowledged but constantly present. The abandoned mill stood isolated among harvested fields, its broken silhouette black against night sky. As we approached, I detected unfamiliar scents. Blood, certainly, but mixed with something else. Something ancient and wrong that triggered visceral response even in my undead form. Stay behind me, I instructed as we reached the structure's edge. Your heartbeat will alert it to our presence. I can approach silently. It has exceptional hearing, Thorn warned, and some kind of awareness of movement even in complete darkness. As do I reminded him. Predator recognizes predator through shared adaptations. I entered the mill first, moving with unnatural stillness through collapsed sections and decaying machinery. The scent grew stronger inside. Blood. Death. Something else beneath those obvious markers. Something primal that spoke directly to oldest parts of consciousness. I found evidence of recent feedings in the mill's lower levels. Human remains partially consumed, discarded with neither ceremony nor attempt at concealment. The pattern suggested feeding frenzy rather than calculated predation. Hunger, overwhelming reason. I recognized the behavior from my earliest days of transformation, before control developed through centuries of practice. Recently transformed, I told Thorn when he joined me, his movements careful but inevitably louder than my own. Or newly arrived in this territory, the feeding pattern shows minimal restraint or concern for discovery. He examined the remains with professional detachment, masking genuine horror I detected in his elevated heart rate. Different from vampire predation, he noted. Different mechanism, similar fundamental nature, I corrected. All predation serves same essential function, consumption of others to sustain self. The specifics vary, but the principle remains constant. He gave me sharp look. Philosophy seems inappropriate given current surroundings. On the contrary, understanding fundamental nature allows prediction of behavior patterns. I indicated specific marks on scattered remains. Note, consumption focused on organ meat rather than muscle tissue. Preference for liver, heart, brain. Nutritional efficiency rather than mere bloodlust. We continued our search through the mill's extensive structure. I tracked the creature's movement patterns through scent trails and subtle marks overlooked by human perception. Thorn followed, documenting our findings in small notebook produced from inner pocket. The hunter's methodology remained meticulous despite physical discomfort from recent injuries. Near dawn, we discovered what appeared to be primary sanctuary, a chamber in deepest section of mill's foundation, accessible only through narrow passage that would force most creatures to enter single file. Inside, we found nest constructed from clothing and possessions of victims, personal items arranged in peculiar patterns suggesting ritual significance rather than mere collection. "It will return here," I said with certainty. The arrangement of tokens indicates territorial marking more complex than simple animal behavior. "This represents home rather than mere shelter." "Then we prepare," Thorn replied. "Set trap rather than continuing pursuit in daylight when it might have advantages we don't yet understand." We established ambush position with careful attention to sight lines and escape routes. Thorn prepared specialized weapons while explaining their design and function. Silver-edged blades, projectiles treated with compounds effective against various supernatural entities, incendiary devices capable of purification through fire. As dawn approached, I felt familiar, heaviness settling into limbs. "I must withdraw," I told him reluctantly. "Daylight hours remain problematic regardless of shelter." "I can maintain position alone," he assured me. "Return at sunset. It likely hunts at night regardless of transformation trigger. Be cautious, hunter. This creature's behavior suggests intelligence alongside hunger. It may anticipate conventional traps." I located secure position for daylight hours in adjacent root cellar, its earthen walls and absence of windows providing necessary protection from sun. Before consciousness faded, I experienced unusual concern for Thorn's safety during my period of dormancy. The voices offered contradictory assessment of this emotional response. Some suggested pragmatic self-interest in alliance continuation. Others proposed more troubling explanation. After centuries of isolation, I had developed genuine connection to mortal, whose fundamental purpose remained my destruction. When consciousness returned at sunset, I emerged immediately to find Thorn still maintaining vigilant position. His condition had deteriorated further during daylight hours, exhaustion evident in slowed movements, pain visible in facial expressions he could no longer fully control. Yet his determination remained undiminished. "No sign of return," he reported as I joined him. "No movement or sound throughout day." "It likely maintains alternate sanctuary for daylight hours," I suggested, "or perhaps feeds for multiple nights before returning to primary territory." We resumed our wait, maintaining silence except for occasional necessary communication. Hours passed without incident. The peculiar intimacy of shared purpose created unexpected comfort, despite our fundamental opposition. I found myself appreciating Thorn's disciplined patience, his capacity for extended vigilance despite physical limitations. Near midnight, I detected approaching presence, subtle disturbance in night air, unfamiliar heartbeat, moving with unnatural rhythm. Scent of recent feeding. I signaled to Thorn with prearranged gesture, indicating direction and approximate distance. He readied weapons with practiced efficiency, positioning himself at optimal angle for initial strike. I moved to secondary position, preparing to intercept if primary ambush failed. Our coordination reflected predatory efficiency from different perspectives. Hunter and hunted temporarily united against greater threat. The creature entered its sanctuary with surprising grace for its apparent size. In darkness that presented no obstacle to my vision, I observed its form with scholarly interest. Humanoid, but not human. Proportions subtly wrong. Limbs too long. Joints that moved in directions human anatomy would not permit. Covering of coarse hair or fur visible in patches where clothing had torn during transformation. Thorn allowed it to advance fully into chamber before triggering his trap. Weighted nets, descending from prepared positions above. Blessed silver chains concealed beneath scattered debris on floor. The creature reacted with supernatural speed, avoiding some elements but becoming entangled in others. What followed was violence too rapid for mortal perception to fully process. The creature fought with desperation and strength exceeding even my considerable abilities. Thorn engaged with Hunter's precision, each movement calculated to maximize effect, while minimizing exposure. I circled and struck from constantly changing angles, using immortal stamina to maintain pressure when Thorn required momentary retreat. The battle continued with brutal efficiency. The creature howled in languages I recognized from centuries past, some extinct for generations. Its transformation accelerated under stress, human features giving way entirely to something ancient and primal. Claws extended from elongated fingers. Teeth descended into something approximating wolf but wrongly proportioned. In crucial moment, Thorn was thrown against far wall, impact audibly breaking ribs. The creature advanced on him with killing intent, clear in its posture. I intercepted with full application of vampiric strength, driving the creature backward into prepared position where Thorn had arranged his most effective weapons. I called, maintaining my grip despite the creature's frenzied struggle. Thorn activated final element of his trap despite evident pain from his injuries. Containers of blessed oil shattered, contents igniting on contact with prepared flame. Fire engulfed both creature and myself in same purifying blaze. Fire remains among few genuine threats to vampiric existence. I released the creature and retreated, a supernatural speed barely sufficient to escape worst effects of rapidly spreading flames. The creature proved less fortunate or capable. Its howls transformed from rage to agony as fire consumed its physical form. Thorn watched impassively as the creature burned, making no move to assist me despite our temporary alliance. In that moment, fundamental truth reasserted itself. Hunter remained hunter. Predator remained predator. Cooperation extended only to mutual threat, not to preservation of natural enemy. I extinguished, lingering, flames on my clothing and flesh. Assessing damage with detached precision, burns would heal given time and sufficient feeding. No permanent harm had occurred. The creature continued to burn, its form collapsing into unrecognizable mass as purifying fire completed its work. Effective trap, I acknowledged once. Flames subsided enough for conversation, though perhaps you might have mentioned its radius would include your temporary ally. Thorn shrugged, the gesture causing visible pain from his broken ribs. The fire was necessary to ensure complete destruction. Its position couldn't be predicted with perfect accuracy given combat variables. Of course, I made no effort to conceal skepticism. Tactical necessity rather than convenient opportunity to eliminate two threats simultaneously. He met my gaze without apology. Would you have acted differently in reversed positions? The question deserved honest consideration. The voices offered various assessments, none entirely convincing. After lengthy pause, I provided most accurate response available. Unknown, I admitted. Centuries of existence create patterns difficult to predict with certainty. The scholar might have honored alliance. The predator might have seized opportunity, The balance between them shifts constantly. We departed the mill separately. Temporary alliance concluded with destruction of mutual threat. Thorn returned to city to recover from his injuries. I remained in surrounding countryside for several nights, hunting local wildlife to heal burns sustained during confrontation. The unusual feeding pattern provided minimal sustenance but avoided complications of human predation while in weakened state. Our regular meetings resumed the following month, with no direct acknowledgement of potential betrayal during Creature's destruction. The incident itself became case study in our ongoing exchange of information. Thorn documented the creature's characteristics and effective methods for its elimination. I provided historical context for similar entities encountered during centuries of existence. Yet, subtle change had occurred in our unusual relationship. The temporary alignment against common enemy created reference point beyond abstract philosophical exchange. We had acted in concert despite fundamental opposition of our natures. This practical cooperation, however limited and self-interested, introduced possibility previously unconsidered. Perhaps predator and hunter could coexist within carefully defined boundaries. Perhaps opposition need not always manifest as destruction. Perhaps understanding itself represented value, transcending simple binary conflict. The voices remained divided on this possibility. Some counseled retreat and severance of contact. Others suggested continued engagement under heightened caution. Most interesting were those proposing evolution beyond established patterns. Adaptation to circumstances unprecedented in my centuries of existence. As always, I documented these developments in my journals with scholarly detachment, the undead philosopher observing his own continued transformation across immeasurable nights, the hunter of knowledge still seeking understanding of death's true nature despite having become its embodiment. The irony remains exquisite, even after centuries of contemplation. The answer continues to evolve, one night at a time, one feeding at a time, one conversation at a time. The hunger remains constant, the guilt persists, the voices continue their contradictory counsel. Yet something else has emerged alongside these familiar elements, something unexpected after centuries of solitary existence: curiosity about what happens next.